whole hybrid cloud identity. It allows you to connect authenticate machines on your domain, services on-prem, as well as authenticate cloud. And it allows you to connect Office 365 and use that same identity to log on to other SaaS applications. First, you connect and sync Windows Server Active Directory with Microsoft Azure Active Directory. I sort of don't like that they called it Azure Active Directory. When I think of Active Directory, I think of all of the things that you can do with on-prem AD, group policy, machine accounts, things like that. That's not really an Azure Active Directory. I have this future wish that I could do that with Azure Active Directory. I don't know if it's on a roadmap, but it's kind of my wish. But you sync your on-prem with Azure. If you're using Office 365 already, you've done that. You probably have a little DirSync tool that runs and puts the usernames up there and may or may not sync passwords. Yes?
This is Azure Passive Directory right now.
Sort of, yes. Yes, kind of. Yeah, you could get in that. Not quite, but Azure, not so Active Directory, less active. Yeah.
Secondary directory.
Handicap, I don't know. Just, but anyway.
Janelle, is sync one way or two way?
Sync is now two-way.
So if you change local, it syncs to the cloud?
And if you, yeah, it depends on what version of DirSync you're using at this point. So if you're a long-time adopter of Office 365 and you only have the one-way sync, then there's a tool and there's an update process. But anyway, they keep changing the tools and they're consolidating them now. But standard sync. Yes. Anyway, so you sync to the cloud. Users log on with one ID. They log on locally with their email address or whatever your UPN is going to be. They log on to Office 365 the same way. However, you can also pre-integrate popular SaaS applications, Salesforce, things like that. Anybody have a company that's got a social media account now? Twitter, Facebook, a couple of them, yeah. We used to just block that at the firewall, right? That was the solution to the security issue with Facebook, just blocked at the firewall. Now we can't. Now we actually have to give people.
You want us to put that through now?
Right. Yeah. Now people seem to need that now. So you can pre-integrate a lot of those popular SaaS applications with your account that exists in Azure Active Directory. So imagine extending that Office 365 account that you already have. They log on with that, and then they can also get to Facebook, or they can also get to Salesforce, or they can also get to an HR system, or Dropbox, or whatever, without having to log on with a different username and password. Simple sign-on. Wouldn't it be cool if you could create an Azure Active Directory user and automatically give them Salesforce without having to go to Salesforce? Some of the applications, Salesforce is one of them, that the APIs exist and we have the federation so that you can do that. Other things like Facebook, we just use the public APIs and kind of do a pass the hash for you so the user can put the username and password in Azure Active Directory, and then they don't have to log on separately to Facebook. It just gets passed. What's cool about that from a shared account standpoint, if you've got a social media system or something where everybody uses the same Twitter account, but you don't want them to have the password because you don't want them to log on to Twitter at home and send out things from the bar, that are inappropriate for your company, you can put the password in and no one actually then knows it. They just authenticate straight through. So, it's kind of cool. You can manage all these identities and access to the cloud applications from one place. You get that centralized administration for some of the cloud-based SaaS apps. And you also get a whole bunch of reporting. You should be able to tell with the advanced reporting, you can do things like get that impossible travel report when somebody logs on from the United States and then 15 minutes later logs on from Japan. And you're like, wait a minute, that can't happen. Get reports on things like that. This is this common identity sync. If you're already using Office 365 and syncing your on-prem directory into Azure Active Directory, the DirSync does that. Now it can go the other way as well. So if you change your password in Azure Active Directory, it'll sync back to on-prem. What this allows you to do is log on in either location. When you log on to something on-prem, you're trying to get an on-prem resource, you authenticate against your local Active Directory. When you're logging on to a cloud resource, you're authenticating with Azure Active Directory. This is great if your internet connection or the office goes down and people have to work from home, they can still get to their cloud resources, Office 365, or app that you might have developed in the cloud or something like that. They can get to all their Azure resources without having to authenticate on-prem. Now, if you have some regulations against that, or you still want to hold on to that authentication, you can put in ADFS with the Federation, which still does the identity sync, but when people log on to Azure, it's passed back through to your on-prem to actually authenticate.
So it won't work with your local.
It won't work if your local prem is down. So there's trade-offs. But if controlling the actual authentication is a requirement, then that's what you do. You can solve that though by putting a copy of your domain controller in Azure and building your ADFS. Yeah, anyway, there's ways around that. So with Azure Active Directory, you're going to get to monitor and protect a lot of the access to the enterprise apps. There's built-in security features. Those are security reports that I mentioned. And then you can also step this up to multi-factor authentication. Everybody knows what a multi-factor authentication is. Everybody's using it for their Gmail now, right? It's like, it should almost be a crime if multi-factor authentication is available for something that you're using and you don't have it turned on. You get the text message on your phone, or you've got the Authenticator app. You can do this with your Azure Active Directory as well. Some of the Azure Active Directory features, there's a couple different levels. There's a free level, there's a basic level, and then there's the premium level. With the free level, you get a directory service with up to 500,000 objects in it. Who has more than 500,000 objects in their Active Directory on-prem? Okay, he has to buy the premium. Other than that, the rest of you could probably use free. You get the directory sync tool, some user-based management, self-service change password for cloud users. What's the difference between change password and reset password?
Who changes
Whether
the
you
password?
know the password or not. You can change your password if you know it already, but you can't resetting it means you don't know it. So you can do change password with free, but if you want actually people to be able to reset their passwords without calling you, you need to pay a little bit for basic or pay for premium. The security reports, you get some basic ones with all of them, and then there's some extra fancy security reports. If you actually want an SLA with your Azure AD, you do have to pay for basic. It doesn't come with the free. And there's some company branding and stuff that you can do so that your Azure page is there. So there's a couple different versions. So new in Azure Active Directory, it's currently in preview, is the Azure Active Directory Connect tool. This replaces dir sync and AD sync and all of the other sort of disjointed tools that they've sort of put out. They kind of put out dir sync when Office 365 came out, and then they kind of built the Azure Active Directory, some other features separately, and created a separate tool for that. And then they merged your Office 365 directory with the Azure Active Directory, so now they had two tools that did the same thing for the same location. Then they added on features. Now they've just made one. Oh, and then if you wanted to do ADFS, that was a whole separate tool that you went through. Now it's all one tool. So you go to one place, you download one tool, and it does all of the appropriate syncing for you. And it steps you through it in a nice, tell us what you want to do and we'll tell you how to do it. A sniggle tool, yes. So that's Azure Active Directory. So we're going to set that aside. That's our identity management. You can use that without sticking another thing in the cloud. Now let's go on to some of the actual infrastructure as a service stuff. On the storage side, right now we've got over 30 plus trillion objects in Azure Storage. Some people say it's better than Amazon S3. Blaine will probably disagree with me, but there it is. Why would you actually want to use cloud storage? So data grows exponentially, 50 to 60% annually. Does anybody delete anything anymore? No.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. The wrong stuff, right?
Clean system, yeah.
Right. Well, yeah. But on your servers, like if you go to a department and say, "Hey, clean out the stuff on the file server that you don't use anymore," that never happens.
You mean the data?
The data. Yeah. How about your CEO? Do they delete email ever? No. Okay. So you've got all this exponential data growth, and you just keep buying storage for it, right? Storage is sort of cheap. You just Keep throwing at it, you get more disks. But eventually, you bought a piece of hardware and you reach the point where you can't put any more disks in. So now you have to make another CapEx purchase. Do I buy another disk shelf to go on it? Do I buy another device to keep holding this data? When only a little bit of it is actually the working set. People only use a small percentage of it, and that actually stays pretty steady. Kind of rotates out. So you want to keep the stuff that people uses close to them. If you're still dealing with if you've still got a bunch of people who work out of an office, moving all of their stuff to the cloud doesn't really make sense. It's going to be faster in-house. Your network speeds are faster, you're not going over your internet connection, however fast or slow that may be. It makes sense to keep things local if your people are local. However, your cloud storage opportunity is all of the stuff that nobody uses anymore. Because if the fastest storage is the stuff that's right in your office and your data center now, or the best storage, then filling it up with crap that people haven't touched in the last 10 years, that you're holding on for some compliance reason perhaps, or because occasionally the CEO asks for emails from God knows whenever, you can move that to the cloud. SAN storage costs are 4 times cloud storage at this point. So you can take advantage of a lot of that cloud storage to just offload that and better utilize the equipment that you already have in-house. You already spent money for it, use it to its potential, and then you don't have to buy more. Oh, look at somebody, Michael, he tweeted at me. There you go. Anyway. When you store data on Azure, it's stored in 3 locations in a storage stamp. Just imagine a storage stamp as a rack of servers in a single data center. 3 times, highly durable. If one disappears, we just make another copy, and life goes on. However, we are in the Bay Area, and nobody likes storing all their data in one place. So we do have an option for continuous storage georeplication, and this is on by default. Whenever you create storage in Azure, you get it continuously georeplicated to another location at least 400, 250 miles away. However, in the same country. So we're not going to georeplicate storage out of the country for you, or into other states in the United States, another data center. We also have options. If you've got a regulatory requirement that says you actually have to keep it in California or in something, you can turn that off and get locally, just local copies of the storage. You can also do things like zone redundant. So instead of just being in the same data center, it'll be in the same set of data centers, but still in the same zone. And then we also have one that's georeplication sort of plus. That is the read-only copy. That georeplicated copy, by default, you don't have any access to. Microsoft would flip over to that in the event of some sort of catastrophic failure of the primary storage. The read-only storage, actually, you can get URLs and access to that for read-only. So you could put databases over there, or any data that's over there, and actually run tests against it for disaster recovery if you wanted to. So that is an option that's available as well. And then how do you manage the storage? There's a couple things that you can do. We've got we don't have third-party tools, but there's a lot out there, Cloud Explorer, and you can just search that on the internet and get a whole bunch of them. Storage Explorers require your storage key. Your storage account comes with 2 512-bit keys, and you can use them interchangeably and swap them out. If you've got apps, you wouldn't want to delete a key without giving somebody another key, so that's why you have extra keys, so you can do some key rotation. You have to give that key to your Storage Explorer so it can get in there. Azure Copy, there's stuff like that. PowerShell does it. You can also get direct web access to some of your storage and download things directly from your storage based on the URL. Some of the things that are relatively new in Azure Storage: import-export service. This has been generally available, I think, since the beginning of the year. How do you get all that data up into Azure? You don't push it over the pipe. You put it on a disk. You send it to Microsoft. They'll load it into the storage account that you suggest on the back end using the back network. So that's pretty cool. Azure Files. Sharing files between applications within Azure. So you can build several virtual machines within Azure and then set up a storage area that's independent and have them all connect to it using SMB. Great way to put all of your tools in one location or particular files in one location and have all the VMs be able to access that. And also premium storage, which is also in preview. This is SSD drive storage instead of spinning disks. And that's got your I/O intensive workloads, significantly higher throughput, significantly more cost. But you can provision a persistent disk to a VM and use the SSD storage. So that's storage. Any questions? Oh, you're all totally cool. Awesome. All right.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Where you do a replication, can you create also your on-premise to replicate like for disaster recovery as well?
Can you replicate storage like?
Like if you have right now we have like a couple data center that we replicate
Okay.
an office.
Right.
Can I make one of those site as
Like a DFS sort of site? Yes, you can. You could build you could I don't know if you can do it directly to storage, but you could build file services within there and do that. Azure Backup, there's also Azure Backup components. You could back up directly to Azure, things like that. So there's a couple different things, but you can't really use storage right now as you can't connect storage kind of as a destination drive directly to on-prem. You have to have something out there sort of front end again. Yes?
This is a general question, and I'm willing to just put it off if it's too far into left field. But when you were talking about creating virtual machines and then storing all the data on a single storage service, so when we look at our bill
Yeah.
to try to understand what our costs are, it only goes down as far as the service. So I can't tell what any one particular machine uses because it only goes down to the storage. So is there any thought that, you guys know this, and is there thinking about trying to get a lower level of granularity so we can see our costs?
Oh, so right now there's not.
Right.
I don't know. I know one of the things that they're doing, at least for enterprise accounts, is allowing you to create sub-subscriptions so that as you create different machines and different subscriptions, you could use that for billing purposes, but allow you to drill down into a particular, say, storage account, carve that up. I don't think we've got anything on the roadmap to get that specific. So the best way then to sort of manage that would be able to create different storage accounts for different, so.
Thank you.
Any other ones? No.
Something else to do the trick.
It would give you, give you a little bit. So you've got this storage. So these buckets of storage, you can put all sorts of things in these storage, virtual machines, just files, blobs, pages, all that sort of stuff. But that's fun. But if we're talking about infrastructure as a service, we want to start getting down to the cool stuff, which for me is the networking and the actual machines. Because I want to recreate what I have in my data center as closely as I can get it there. Because I want to do DR testing. I want to possibly move workloads into the cloud. I want to be able to test stuff that's close. Who does testing in-house right now that involves using the old desktops and servers that you sort of abandoned 4 years ago? It's really hard to test things appropriately and write good documentation when you're not really sure that your test lab is exactly equivalent to what you're doing in-house. So virtual networks and being able to build virtual machines helps with that. You've got this secure, isolated virtual network. You can bring your own DNS. You can actually bring your own IP addresses. When infrastructure as a service first came out and you were doing virtual networking, you could only use the non-routable ones, 10.0.0, 192.168. Does anybody work for a place that's got an educational place that has externally routable IP addresses that they use in-house? No?
Not anymore.
Not anymore, okay. Well, if you wanted to do that, you could actually carve off a subset and put it in Azure. Azure won't route them externally. That, I think, would actually break the internet. But it will let you use that numbering scheme so that if you have an in-house numbering scheme that is not RFC compliant, you can match that in Azure. Allows hybrid cross-premise networking, site-to-site VPNs available, point-to-point networking available. So you're building a protected network. Just imagine this as a remote data center, level 3 or whatever, or a remote branch office. You treat it sort of the same way. What would you do? I use 192.168.10 dot something in my main office. I would use 192.168.11 dots whatever in my other branch offices like that. You do the same thing in Azure. Use a numbering scheme that works for you. Bring your own DNS. I might have that branch office come back across the wire to hit DNS in my local network. You might not. You might put a DNS server there. Your decision. You can kind of do whatever you want with Azure. Looks a little bit like this. Got your on-prem network. There's my 10.1 address space. My cloud network has a 10.2 address space. Site-to-site IPsec VPN tunnel over the public internet. You have a VPN gateway on your side. There's a whole list of what VPN gateways are supported. A lot of the common ones are there. If you want to do multiple, you can now do multiple site-to-site tunnels. So if you have more than one physical office and you want them to be able to connect to one Azure virtual network, you can do that. You do want to check the list of supported VPN devices because some support single. For multiple virtual networks, you need dynamic routing, and if you don't have dynamic routing supported on your VPN device, then that won't work. So there are limitations to just your equipment. But at any rate, you can set up the site-to-site VPN tunnel and treat your network like another branch office. You can see that we've got a lot of the usual stuff in here. We've got your Active Directory, you've got your SQL, you've got your another VPN gateway, and maybe your external subnet, your web-facing subnet, infrastructure as a service, SharePoint. How many people run a web server for their public-facing intranet in-house? 1, 2 people, couple people. My old company did that, but we were a really small company, and every time we did maintenance, we took down our public-facing internet. Like, who really does that anymore? I mean, that's what the web is for. It's supposed to be there all the time. So being able to put an an IIS server or your Apache server or whatever out there in Azure, keep it connected so you can still manage it just the way you would in-house, but not have to take it down when you do, your on-prem maintenance. Point-to-site VPN for remote users allows you to add a VPN service to your local machines, allows them to connect right in. They get their own subnet. I start thinking disaster recovery scenarios with this. Depending on how much you have out in the cloud network, your on-prem network could disappear and your end users could VPN right into your services in Azure. This AD-DNS server right there, that's traditional on-prem Active Directory right there. Setting aside the whole Azure Active Directory thing, which is its own kind of, deal, you can just put a copy of your domain controller in Azure. How many people with their disaster recovery plans, and I know you've got them all documented out, you keep them completely up to date, right? Completely. After you restore the backup, after you build a server that's actually going to read your tapes, what's the next thing you do? You build a domain controller. It takes what, 3 hours? Probably 2, maybe from scratch, depending on how from scratch you're working. If it was just there already, like that's pretty cool. That saves me, because it's much faster to sync a domain controller with, on-prem with the Active Directory that's already there than restoring your entire domain from scratch off a tape. So, tape?
Who uses tape anymore?
How many people are still using tape? There's your answer. All right.
I love it. Are you kidding me?
Right. Okay. So, tape. So with virtual networking, the multiple site-to-site virtual networking is actually relatively new. It used to be just one. VNet to VNets. Now this is really where it kind of gets cool for me. I don't have a home network to play in. So if I live in a loft, I got 2 kids, there's no room for that. But if I want to create that scenario, I can now do it with VNet. I can build one VNet in Azure and pretend it's my core, and then another VNet in Azure and pretend it's my Azure, and connect them up with a VPN tunnel, and get that experience. Also, internal load balancing. Initially, our load balancing existed on the public IP addresses only. Now you can also do internal load balancing on the internal IP addresses that are assigned to your machines. We also have ExpressRoute. If the public internet and routing over the public internet is something against your rules, this would be your regular virtual network. You can use an exchange provider or do MPLS and route over dedicated private fiber through an exchange provider. So that is available as well. So we've got storage, which you need to put your blobs and your virtual machines in, and you've got a network to drop them in. So now we'll just take a look at the virtual machines themselves. This is the A-series VMs. We now have D-series and G-series, and there's some secret, I think, DS or GS series, the ones where you can attach the premium storage to. But we have a whole bunch of different options and sizes to handle your workload. The A8 and A9 ones happen to have InfiniBand on the back end, so if you need some high-speed networking in the back, that's also available back there. I always start with like a small one, like A1. You can change them midstream if you need to. You can up them and down them. If you're going to do something like that in production, test a little, because if you select some of the smaller ones, you might end up on some of the older hardware and you might not be able to scale up as high. That's less of an issue now as they keep replacing hardware, but it's kind of good to know. And if you pick an A8 or A9, you can't go down to something lower because the InfiniBand is a factor there that kind of locks you in.
And Janelle, how
Yep.
did you ever come up with the A's?
I don't know.
Okay.
And then I know the G ones that they just made stands for like Godzilla, because they're supposed to be like huge. Yeah, they was like a Godzilla name for them, so they called them G. I don't know where. I guess
So
they
it's
just.
completely arbitrary.
I think it's completely arbitrary because originally A0, A1, A2, and A3, it used to be like extra small, medium, and large, like t-shirt sizes.
Yeah.
And then it got to the point where like what do you do? XXXXXXL. So then they switched to the A7s and A8s. Insider tip: who does a lot of PowerShell? Okay, one person. When you start doing Azure more and you start doing PowerShell more, you can use PowerShell to provision stuff in Azure, but a secret little thing is the PowerShell commandlets. When you're trying to provision one of the smaller ones, you have to use the old t-shirt size words, small. If you said A1, it wouldn't know what you were talking about. But then like A5, you would use A5, so little insider tip till they fix that. Lots of platform images available. Linux is completely supported, as well as our own stuff. Microsoft, we love Linux. Yeah. Yay! And we also support a lot of open source. Obviously, all the Linux. We have connectors that you can turn on for Chef or Puppet. If you're already doing automation in-house and want to be able to extend that to your Azure VMs, you just turn on those extensions. And you also have the ability to put in custom scripts. I'm actually going to walk through Azure after I get through the slides so we can kind of look at all that sort of stuff. Virtual machine portability. It is VHDs in Azure right now, not VHDXs right now, so VHDs. But if you're already doing Hyper-V in-house or using VHDXs, you can move those into the cloud and move them out again, which is pretty nice. That means you can experiment a little bit. If you're not sure that it's real well in the cloud, you make a copy of it from on-house, you move it into the cloud, try it out for a little while. If it sucks, move it back or delete it, vice versa. So no cloud, no lock in there. We also give you the opportunity to auto scale. Who has all that extra hardware sitting there that's ready to go when something needs to scale up? So you can auto scale within Azure directly. Azure is not going to magically make VM copies for you. You have to kind of prepare this ahead of time. This is great for things that need scale. External facing websites is a really good example of this. And what happens with this is, if you have a bunch of IIS servers, you create one, okay? And you make multiple copies of it in Azure, and you turn them off, except for the one or two that you have on your regular thing. You put them in a group, you say, I want to auto scale this based on this CPU load for this amount of time or whatever. And as those thresholds are hit, Azure will turn on the extra VMs. Now you do need to keep those in sync. And you have to think about, if you had this scaling in-house, how would you keep that sort of stuff in sync? You might be using, Chef or Puppet or something like a desired state configuration from PowerShell to sort of sync that server, bring that server up to date as it comes in. But that allows you to automatically scale within Azure on that external facing without having to have that equipment ready and running ahead of time. If we could only pay as we went, in our own data center, right? Like I only need to buy these servers and bring them in. Azure's all pay as you go, so you only pay for what's on. If you create a whole bunch of VMs, you do pay a little for the storage. However big the storage is, you do pay for that. But the storage is pretty cheap. It's the compute that's going to really cost you if you leave it running. So being able to turn it off and turn it on as you go is awesome. I do this in the lab all the time. I spin up a bunch of machines, do whatever I'm doing in my lab, turn them off. Now, there's this construct that you do kind of have to know about. Virtual machines live inside cloud services. Cloud services are this is how you get your public IP address in Azure. It gives you the public DNS name, it's your internal firewall of Azure, it does the load balancing. So you build a VM, it's going to automatically end up in a cloud service. What's cool is you can put more than one VM in a cloud service, and they all answer to the same external DNS name and the same external IP address. So this is where you get the external load balancing for IIS servers or SQL servers or whatever you might need load balancing for, comes right in the cloud service. It's also an internet firewall, so you're only going to get one IP address, but it does standard port forwarding stuff so that you can RDP into each one of those machines individually. You get a different port opening for RDP. Windows machines gets RDP and PowerShell ports open right away. If you build a Linux box up in there, you get SSH open, and those ports are created. You can manage those endpoints. You can put ACLs on those endpoints. You can control. Yes? Go ahead, Blaine.
Have they ever got to a point where you don't want a public IP?
You can turn them off.
Finally?
You can take down endpoints. You're going to get, the cloud service is going to get an IP address.
Yeah. But you have to go and turn it off.
But you can make it so that there's no ACLs that actually answer to that IP address. But then there's no
And
way
it
to...
also has an external DNS automatic with it.
Yes, you get the DNS. If you don't do any
For example,
internal...
if you want to bring it to the domain, you go, I don't want to do that shit.
Out.
Yeah.
So you can turn off those endpoints. I know one customer that what they did was they had all the PowerShell to get into Azure, so they would create their machines. So like if you created a cloud service, a virtual network with a cloud service with say your domain controller, and you were connecting to it over point-to-point VPN using internal addresses, you might not necessarily need that accessible from the outside. So you could use Azure to go in and delete all of the external endpoints. You'd still have an external IP address assigned to the cloud service, but nobody would answer the door when you tried knocking on it. So what this company did was they had all their Azure PowerShell ready to go, so whenever they wanted to RDP into that machine from the outside for whatever reason, they'd log into Azure, they'd run the PowerShell that they had that opened up the endpoint, then they'd do what they had to do, and then they'd turn it off again. So, so it's completely workable that way. You can also put the ACLs on the endpoints so that you can only get to them from certain IP addresses. So maybe only your company's external IP address, so you could only use your personal public IP address. All of that's available. So putting it kind of all together, the components that we talked about, we've got our cloud service, we've got our VM with our data disks, and you can add multiple data disks to your virtual machines. You've got the VNet that ties them together, potentially a site-to-site gateway, your own DNS that you might have brought. And then on the outside of this cloud service is the publicly assigned IP address. That's your VIP it's called. It's assigned by Azure, it's bound to a cloud service. You can't bring your own public IP addresses at this point, but you can, so like if you have a set of public IP addresses that you already own, you can't give them to Azure to manage. That's sort of kind of a routing nightmare right now.
You're still doing the whole shared DNS pool, so if I come up with, if I want Blaine, dot whatever it is .com, and somebody else, has already.
Oh, if you want like Blaine's vnet.cloudnet.app, yes, your cloud service is still going to get a DNS name when you name your cloud service. It has to be unique to everybody who's using Azure. However, most of us would then go ahead and take our external DNS and redirect. You can also redirect directly to the IP address because you can reserve an Azure IP address as your own without it not change. So initially it was random and you could potentially change. Now you can actually reserve it so you're getting the same IP address for your cloud service regardless if it's running or not. So they have added that. So you could direct your personal external DNS directly to the IP address and skip over the cloud service DNS name that comes with it. Then you get your internally assigned address, dynamically IP address assigned by Azure. That's going to be the VNet of the VM in Azure. Even for domain controllers. Every machine that you spin up in Azure, if you make a copy of a machine that you have on-prem that has static DNS, you want to make sure you switch that over to dynamic before you put it up there. You can do internal reservations within Azure now in your VNet and actually do reservations so that it looks static and your IP address is static. But everything is handed out within Azure using dynamic addresses. And Azure has some security things in there that if they don't hand out the IP address, eventually they'll stop routing traffic to it. So you could put a machine up there with a static IP address and have it be correct in your VNet and have it work for a little bit. And then eventually it will disappear. So if you build a VM and then switch it, yeah. So anyway, always leave it dynamic. And then your incoming requests will go to that public report. And the public port's going to be your public endpoint. And it will load balance across everything in the cloud service automatically if that is what you needed to do, if they all do the same things. Then you do something that is important for your SLA, is you build an availability set around it. Uptime is a big deal when it comes to the cloud. Who's got the 99.5 in their current office? I mean, okay, kind of toss up, sometimes you may. If you want that SLA, you need to have 2 of everything in Azure. And you tell them that these 2 things are the same by putting an availability set around them. That tells Azure to not put them on the same rack. Because we know what happens when we put the 2 things that we need on the same rack, and the rack goes down, or they do updates on that rack, they would take your entire thing down. So by putting in an availability set, Azure will be like, oh, put these on different racks in the same data center, so that when we do maintenance, or if a power supply blows or whatever, your infrastructure won't completely go down. And then auto-scaling wraps around that as well if you want to take advantage of auto-scale. Everybody following so far? Okay. All right. So some of the things that are new in Azure, remote app. This is completely random, but terminal services. Who's got terminal services in-house or remote desktop services? Also one of those things that's kind of a little pain in the butt to manage. Depends. Remote app allows you to do that whole remote web portal that comes with terminal services or remote desktop services now, and post that all in the cloud. So your whole terminal services infrastructure is basically software as a service in cloud. You do that by creating your terminal services image and uploading it and then declaring your remote app and turning it on. And then that auto scales for you automatically as well, which is pretty nice. Azure Site Recovery, the ability to replicate to Azure. Azure Site Recovery has existed for a while. If you were using System Center and you had 2 separate sites, you could use Azure and Hyper-V replication to automatically fail over and orchestrate a failover to a separate physical site. But if you didn't have a physical site, a second physical site, where did you replicate to? So now it's in preview that you can replicate to Azure and use Azure as your second site, which is pretty cool from a DR standpoint. And then also billing alert service. Yes?
What is in preview? What does that mean?
Beta.
Coming soon.
Coming beta, basically.
Does that mean that they take it away?
It's not that they'll take it away. It means that they're not going to put an SLA on it.
Right.
So that's not going to be there. It might not be available in all the regions at once. So you might find that, you'll see some of them like in preview in the US only, and then they roll it out to Asia, they roll it out to Europe as they start doing that. So it usually means not available everywhere, not under the SLA, and that it probably is going to be still a little buggy. And there might be changes that, before it goes live. A lot of it, I use a lot of the in preview stuff, and it's generally, pretty okay, but they're not going to put the SLA on it for you. So if you're using it in production while it's in preview and it goes down, you're not going to get any money back for it. The billing alert service is also in preview, although I don't see why I'd have any problem using that in preview or not. But anyway, you can set billing alerts so that if you want to know that certain accounts are exceeding a certain amount of money, you could turn that on. Huh? Yeah, it is pay as you go, but if you leave stuff on, you might. Okay, case in point, that VNet to VNet experiment that I was telling you about. Okay, virtual networking is not free. Matter of fact, it's pretty darn expensive. When you set up a virtual network, it sets up a virtual gateway. That gateway clocks at about $1 a day, give or take.
All the time.
And it runs all the time, whether you've got something connected on the other end of it or not. So that's about $25, $30 a month. If you do a VNet to VNet, you get 2 gateways. So I had this set up in my MSDN Ultimate, which is $150. And every month I'm like, why am I running out of money? Because it took me a while to figure out that it was the VNets that were eating up like $50, $60 out of my subscription. So a billing alert probably would have helped me on that. Like, hey, your networking's costing you, this month of this much a month, or it's halfway through the month and your money's nearly gone. You might want to know. Yeah, good to know. So billing alert service, customized billing alerts help you monitor your use. Kind of a big deal. All right, so it is self-service. This is an old picture, but you can do whatever you want. This is great. It's a nice web GUI. Fabulous. We're changing it. We're giving you a new Azure portal now. I don't like this yet. It's too, I don't know. Anyway. Yeah. Yeah, that sums it up right about there. Windows 8. They're working on it, but there's some features in this that don't exist in the old portal. And so they're kind of, anyway. There's some things that you can do in this, like if you do the lab, you can set static IP addresses directly in here with the techie box and typing it in. In the old portal, you have to use PowerShell. So there's some things that they're like, oh, we'd like to do, they make it easier for you in the new portal. Eventually, we'll all be forced to this. But really, we're not supposed to be managing things with GUIs at all, right? We're starting to get back to the command line. This is all of us who were raised on NT 4.0 and love the GUI.
It's not an improvement.
It's not an improved something. Okay. You can manage all of this with PowerShell. You can download the PowerShell and put it on your machine and manage Azure directly.
Is that
yes.
PowerShell 4 or 3?
4 right now is what is current. 5 is still in beta. So 4 is kind of what everybody's using right now. PowerShell. There was a couple hands of people who were playing with PowerShell, right? Okay. Really great if you want to repeat stuff that you do all over and over again. It's definitely very command line, and if you've been doing stuff from NT 4 days, I'm just, it's hard for me. I have a hard time saying, let me sit down and figure out how to do this in PowerShell because I can do it faster in the GUI. However, as we move to this whole hybrid cloud thing, going into the GUI and making stuff sort of manually is probably not the best use of your time. We've got bigger problems, right? We've got bigger business problems to solve. There's other ways that we can use the cycle in our brains besides clicking GUI buttons. So PowerShell is definitely a way for you to be able to improve how you manage on-prem and the cloud. So PowerShell allows you to make consistent, safe changes to, who thinks the command line is safe? Let me just type something in there and hope it does what I want,
Who
okay?
thinks the GUI is
If
safe?
you automate certain command line that you used before and you automate
And you
them,
know it, then it's safe.
Yeah.
PowerShell has these great little things you can add on, the dash what if and the dash verbose. What if is awesome. You type out your command, you're not sure, you do dash what if, and it'll just tell you what would happen if it ran. Doesn't actually run it. Verbose gives you a lot more feedback, things like that. So there's definitely ways that PowerShell is safe. It is consistent. It's going to do the same thing over and over again. And believe it or not, we use the same construct, the verb noun, get Azure VM or something like that. It's pretty consistent. And there's a lot of verbs that you can't use a bunch of random verbs to do the same thing. So you can't say get and fetch. Like fetch doesn't work, get does. So there's rules in place so that once you kind of learn PowerShell for doing one thing, it's a little easier to learn how to do PowerShell for another thing. You should care because it's going to ultimately reduce configuration errors, allow you to repeat your process, allow for tests of scripts, ultimately improve efficiency and simplify routine tasks. Once you learn it. Believe me, I know why you kind of worry. PowerShell ISE is a great tool. It's on your box. If you're running Windows 8.1 now, it's there. It gives you the window where you can type stuff and test stuff and look up commandlets. It gives you this drag and drop editing, rich copy and paste. All of the things kind of like Notepad+. Notepad++++, everybody used that from back in the day, kind of like that. Allows you to run sections of your script and lines of your script at a time. And it also has this great tool where you don't even know the PowerShell and you don't know what to do with it. One of the greatest, I've heard people say PowerShell, the only commands you need to know are Control-V and Control-C. Copy somebody else's work and paste it into your window. Totally true, there's a script browser in there, you load that baby up and you say, Active Directory, whatever, create OU and hit go. It'll search all the TechNet scripts and bring you back little chunks of stuff that people have already put up there that do that for you. Then you can take that and edit it and massage it to do what you need, saves you some time. To get started with that, you download the PowerShell module. If you want to connect to Azure, you have to authenticate with your Azure account. There's two ways to do that. You can just have it pop up a window, add Azure account. Will just pop up the window, let you log on with your username and password, just like you log into any other MS property. Or you can actually download a certificate file and store that on your computer. Obviously, that's much more. It saves you the time, but that also means that you have to manage that file. That's really important because that's the keys to your kingdom there. There's commandlet references, all sorts of things. If you want the slides, you can get the slides. Those lines are there. This is going to allow you to automate a whole bunch of things. Virtual machine configuration, being able to spin those babies up, take them down, domain join stuff. You can inject scripts where it'll build the machine and then run, say, Active Directory. It'll install features, install IIS, do all of that. Configure the virtual networking, and configure the storage, take all of that stuff up and down automatically. So, kind of in summary, infrastructure as a service is going to allow you to host your existing applications. This is great lift and shift. You don't have to refactor anything in-house. You just take the service that you're already running, you lift it up, you put it in Azure, see how it runs. If it doesn't work right, you lift it up, put it back down. Oh, there we go. Platform as a service. Oh, I'm in there. You use storage, you use virtual networking. Platform as a service is if you're developing new custom applications or things that really need to be born in the cloud, very customer facing. Use platform as a service. Taking advantage of like SQL Azure, web roles, that you don't manage all of the networking or all of the virtual machines at the bottom. Great for new custom apps, or if it's time to refactor an existing on-prem app to make it more cloud-friendly, look at the platform as a service then. Mobile services exist, caching, that. And then software as a service, taking advantage of existing platform applications. Your platform as a service is somebody else's software as a service, right? It take 3 weeks, or it's going to take too long to provision. If you feel like you're saying no a lot, sometimes the cloud will actually allow you to say yes a little faster. Oh yeah, we can get you that VM. You can test that here.
Preventer of IT.
Huh? The preventer of IT, yes. And to scale on demand.
Actually, what you end up with is shadow IT. So you've got
Yes.
dev guys out there spinning up freaking machines and doing all kinds of different stuff.
What, within your...
So usually what you'll end up doing, right, is you'll get your keys. You're creating an IAM account and you get keys, and then every dev guy has keys, and then they can.
That's where you put on the billing alerts so you can see what they're spending, and then you can go...
Yeah, only if you can do that back.
Yeah. But you've got to. But if you were doing that in-house, you were building your own private cloud, and say having devs in your own organization spinning up stuff, you'd eventually max out on resources, and then you'd get complaints. At least if you let them spin up their crap in Azure, you won't get the complaints.
Somebody will.
Huh?
Somebody
will,
The
right.
bill gets there.
The cloud is not going to prevent the same organizational issues that you have in your organization. It's just going to move them to the cloud. That's policy and procedure. There's some stuff that you're still going to have to fix. The cloud is not going to fix every problem that you have by far, but
It's more of a transformative tool. It takes this problem and turns it into a new one.
right, yes, it is transformative. You still have to really, you have to look at, what the problems are that you're trying to solve and solve them, very specifically. There's a free trial. If you've already used the free trial, you can switch it over to pay-as-you-go. If you've never used the free trial, I lost my Surface now, so I'm very upset with myself. Anyway, when you log into Azure, go here, documentation, RTFM, The actual documentation in Azure is actually pretty decent. So use it if you need it. Go there. This is the portal. I'm going to show you something just to kind of walk through it quickly, and then I never want you to do it again. All right? Here's a virtual machine, and if I want to create a new one, and I'm going to tell you why, quick create. I can put in a DNS name, I can pick my server image, I can put in a username and a password, pick my region that I want to put it in, and hit create a virtual machine. That will have Azure automatically spin up a storage group, a virtual network that you can then not control, and dump a machine in it. It's great for testing. And your developers will do it and then wonder later why they can't connect it on-prem or why they can't do all these other things that they forgot to ask you about. So this is the cloud equivalent of building that box on the old desktop underneath your desk and putting your coffee cup on top of it, and then wondering 6 months later, now that everybody's using it, why you can't scale it or fix it or take it down. Okay, so you can do this for testing and playing and then never do it again. So in real life, you don't even want to start here. Get out of here. You start down here. I like to start in storage. First, you create a storage group. And these are really easy to create. Quick create is the only option here. You create a storage group, and you create a place to put it in. We'll play with the East Coast today. Here's my choices: geo-redundant, locally redundant, stuff like that. The URL has to be unique to core windows.net, and it has to be all lowercase. It's a good tip if you're scripting and you're using something that's dropping a variable in and building different storage groups and things for you. If you set the variable as uppercase, it won't create the storage group. It'll create VMs using the uppercase, but it won't create a storage group that way. So anything variables that you're going to put in to name stuff within scripts, make them lowercase. And then you just go ahead and create the storage account. And it'll go ahead and hook that on the back end. Then the next thing you want to create is your network, which is down here. You can create network before storage or storage before network, but don't create virtual machines until you have both of these things. I want to custom create this. You want to put your network in the same storage location. Okay? You won't even get the option if you create a storage group in the wrong place and then go to find it in the virtual network or vice versa. They won't even become options for each other. So you want those things to be in the same place. Here's where you can add your own DNS server ahead of time if you want. Any DNS, if you don't put anything in here, Azure will just give you one of their DNS servers for the external endpoint names, and it'll be, good to go. If you put something in there, it better work now. If it's on-prem, you have to click site to site and set that up next, otherwise you won't get to the DNS. Or you better be making it next. So if I'm creating a virtual network and then I'm going to put a domain controller in there and you want it to point to itself, you can go ahead and stick the IP address that it's going to have in there now, or you can just go back and do it later. Huh? You will if you are doing your networking. So if I know what networking I'm going to set up, the first machine that you spin up in Azure is always going to end up with the .4 in your network usually. Or if you know you're going to set the IP address with the static, with the PowerShell or static, you can then determine what that's going to be. If you're setting up your networking the same way you do it on-prem, you plan out your network, you know what IP addresses you're going to hand out to machines, you can make that guess in here and and put that in there and know it ahead of time. But I'm not going to know any of this ahead of time. You used to not be able to go back and configure site-to-site VPNs after you created the network. You sort of had to hack it on the back end. Now you can go back and add that on at any time. So none of these decisions are irreversible at this point. Here's where you create your address space. So I like the 192 address space. It's comfy to me. My old company used to use it. That's what I'm used to. And then you do your standard account. I like to be official. Here's where you go ahead and you can add subnets and create subnets. and it'll go ahead and, you know, do the math for you if you want it to do it. But I am going to make it half right here, and then my next subnet will just pick up on the other half. And that's all of my things. If you put a machine in a subnet and then decide later that you need to change the subnet, you can't change subnets with things in them. So do plan your networking. Otherwise, you have to pull that VM out of Azure and then redeploy it after you fix your subnetting. So do try to think ahead a little bit. You can add completely different address spaces if you want to add a whole other IP address in there. And you could also just type in any old address space. If you wanted to steal some of Google's address space, I think they've got part of the 8 there. You could go ahead and use that internally too, and it wouldn't route. But I don't need that. We're just stick with the one address space. Okay. So now that's going to create. Creating a virtual network actually takes a little bit of time. So if you jump right into the VM, that network's not going to be there. But I'm going to let that go ahead and create and pretend that's there for now. Says it's done. So now I've got my storage and my network. Now it is safe to build my virtual machine. This is just like real life, right? You have to have storage, and you have to have a virtual network on-prem before you go creating machines. So now I'm going to create a new machine. Now I'm going to go from gallery, because I'm not going that were just floating around in Azure from previous machines. Say I created a machine in the wrong subnet, I had it all set up just perfect the way I wanted, and then I realized it was in the wrong subnet. If I delete the virtual machine and save the disk, I can then create a new virtual machine in the right subnet and then just attach the disk and save my work. So very much like what you would do, you could do on-prem with, with virtualization in Hyper-V. My images is where you'd find any images that you prepped and sys-prepped and had ready to go and put up in Azure. You'd have them there. I don't have any, so I'm just going to go with data center. Versions. We often have a couple versions back there. If you're doing something where you've created something, you've got web servers or whatever you've created, and you've used a particular version, and later on you're creating new copies, and you still want to use the same version for whatever reason, you can pick the old versions. Give it a virtual machine name. This is the name of the machine. You can pick your tiers. Basic, which just gives you A1 through A4. Makes me think old hardware. And standard, where you can pick between all of the new stuff. The big difference between basic and standard is things like auto scaling. Those features aren't available in basic. They're a little bit cheaper because of that, but I always stick with standard. I tend to go with A1 because it's cool. Username. Don't use administrator. You can't use administrator. Why? Because every Windows machine has administrator, right? It's the first easiest thing to hack. Matter of fact, when they rolled out infrastructure as a service 2 years ago, they allowed you to create administrator, and everybody's administrator started getting hacked. So now you can't create administrator. So I'll do PAC-IT-admin, and you have to come up with a reasonably complex password, and a password one won't work. Okay, this is where the important stuff happens. Cloud service. If you leave it with create a new cloud service, it will automatically look to see if the machine name that you specified before fits. And if it will, it'll just go ahead and create that for you. That's great if you're only putting one machine in one cloud service, but if you're trying to build a web front-end farm and you don't want it to be named server1 at cloudapp.net, you might want to give it a better name. So I'm going to change it to VMs. Let's see if that's available. Okay, here's where this is important. The default was just a random region. Now if I look under storage accounts, it's just there's no storage accounts in that random region. You have to make sure that you're going with the region that you put your storage account in And if possible, if you've created a virtual network, you want to go with the virtual network. If you get here and your virtual network isn't there, just go get a coffee, come back. Just wait for that virtual network to finish cooking so that's available to you. Because if you don't pick the right virtual network, you can't use your address space. Azure will just pretend you it's like quick create. It just dumps you into quick create. So you get that. Now I can see my subnets. I've got 2. I can pick between one or the other. And I can see my storage accounts. Here's where you would create an availability set. If I knew I was creating 2, I could just go ahead and create an availability set and put a name in there. Do not create an availability set unless you're actually going to put 2 in there. It becomes an alerting issue. If you say none, you don't fall under the SLA, and Azure will email you when they take down your data center for maintenance. You'll get an email, hey, we're going to take this down, here's our maintenance window, blah, blah, blah. If you put stuff in an availability set, they don't really tell you that stuff anymore because it shouldn't really be that important to you because you have your availability set. So if you create an availability set and only put 1 machine in it, you're not going to get alerting and it's eventually going to take down your machine. Yeah. So go with none. You can add on availability sets later if you have to. Okay. Here's where you can add some of the cool stuff. Install the VM agent. You generally want to leave that. That's the back door. With Azure, you don't have console. You know, we've all got that. We fall back on that. We can go into our VMware console or our Hyper-V console and actually see what's on the machine on the screen and kind of knock on that, like, why aren't you booting? You don't have that in Azure. So this is the closest thing to it. And you can run PowerShell against this to do things like reset that admin account that you just forgot because you were testing and you created it really quickly and forgot. Or you accidentally uploaded a VM and you forgot to switch it over to static or to DHCP or DHCP from static, and you got to reset the networking. Those are things that that VM agent will help solve for you.
Does it help with blue screens?
What
What if the OS just totally hoses?
You're probably going to create
Just
a
have
new.
to force a reboot?
You can force a reboot with start and stop and just do that. I mean, if you're in a complete loop where that's just dead, then you're just gonna have to, and that'll be the end of it. But yeah, you can. Puppet and Chef, if that's what you use to control things, you can go ahead and put those agents in so you can control that. Custom script allows you to upload pretty much any additional PowerShell that you want to run after the creation of the VM. So you can upload a. If I'm over at ISC, for those of you who haven't looked at that before, if I go ahead and I just load up scripts that I've saved, like Notepad, and then just copy and paste the things that I need so that so I've got stuff for, let's see, I don't know where I've kept it all. It's been a while. So I've got stuff for restarting my VM, stopping my VM. Look at let me open it, see what that's going to look like. It's going to give you the code. You can just copy and paste right out of there, and away you go. So that's ISC. What's pretty cool about this is, like, if I wanted to restart, oh look, I'm not connected, so it won't work. I haven't done this, but if I just wanted to do this line up here, this will run just the selection. So if I highlight just a couple lines, it would just run that. If I click that, it will run everything I have against Azure. So I live in this a lot whenever I'm working in Azure. See that instance size? Small. Right there. That's that t-shirt size that I was telling you about. That is pretty much my demos. Any questions? Anything that I need to recover or anything like that? Reasonably cool? Yeah. Kind of worth trying, at least? Okay. Have fun. And don't leave anything running if you do the trial, because, It's $200 or 30 days, whichever comes first, kind of like the oil change on your car. So you want to try to balance it so you get to the 30 days with saving as much as you want. These two things have been running that Imperfect Lab West. Oh, the other one thing I wanted to show you real quick, since we're here, here we go, that whole Azure Active Directory thing. My Imperfect Lab is actually set up to sync, and I have a couple of users in my domain that automatically sync across. You can take a look at where you can actually add your real domain, because whenever you set up a tenant in Azure, you get the tenant with on Microsoft.com, and nobody wants to log on with that. Like, that's the equivalent of logging on with like an AOL address, right? Like, so you always want to add in your regular domain so that people are logging on with a real email address that matches your internal domain. So that's all right there. And those full reports that I was talking about, password reset activities, group activities, signing in with IP addresses with suspicious activities, signing in from multiple geographies, things like that. All of those reports are part of that. So, and then when it comes to the applications, if I wanted to go ahead and add an application from the gallery, this is where I would tie in those applications with those users that are already provisioned in Active Directory and allow them to control those accounts. So that's right up there in those applications. And then when those people log in to their own kind of cloud portal, they'll see those applications that they can then launch right from there. And it'll tell you which ones require an existing Facebook subscription. That's just going to use the API versus like Salesforce, which will do a little bit more integration. And that varies depending on our relationship with the company and what their APIs allow. So if it doesn't do exactly what you want, it's actually the other company's sort of fault. We try to tie into the APIs as best as we can. But those are some of the cool things to check out. So that's that. That's officially the end. And all the other things are there too. You've got your networks, you've got your traffic manager, stuff. So Doug, that's it. It's 8:30.
Okay. What'd you think?
Oh, if anybody wants the paper lab, you can take a paper copy. You do. Take a paper one. There's 15 of them up here. First come, first serve on that. And seriously, you can just download it. Pass a couple back that way. Pass a couple back that way. That way, no, I gotta go to the back on this one. That's only fair. Gotta go to the back row as well. Fight over them. Go to the.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I actually easier to this.
Do you know what RSA is?
Ours is usually.
I'm sorry, Janelle.
Yeah, that's okay.
I know you went over this, but would you,
I talk fast. I know.
well, I know, but would you please just go to start here? Is it all the goods, the website, just
Oh yeah, here I'll.
where to just start?
Where to start there? Oh yeah. Okay,
If you
so.
would repeat that, please.
Sure, if you go at KMSS, all
It is
the
all,
goods,
okay,
you go there,
got
come
it.
on. It'll take you here. For all my recent presentations, visit this link. Click that link. And then March 2012 PackID Pros. You got the slides, you got the paper.
Great, thank you.
It's on my blog.
It's not OneDrive.
It is OneDrive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it is OneDrive. It's just that it saves me, having just the link off my blog saves me from having to create separate folders for different people. There is actually a much bigger version of this lab, if you want it, that allows you to build out SQL, IIS workloads, and kind of build all of that together, a bigger infrastructure. But I just did the domain controller syncing to Azure Active Directory with the multi-factor, because that's pretty cool, and you can actually set it up to multi-factor on your phone and test it out to log in. So,
Is that on your blog as well?
which
The full one?
the full one, I can add the full one in there. Actually, if you click on the winter 2012 Extend Your Data Center, the lab manual that's in there is the full one.
Is that it?
That's it.
Good.
Unless some people have more questions, in which case I'll answer.
Okay, so somebody have a computer. Can somebody tell me when RSA is?
Look,
It's
that's it.
end of the month. End of April?
You Google free tickets and go. It's worth
No, I don't care about free tickets. So it's end of the month for April?
April 20th through the 24th.
Okay. And then Ignite is May 2nd. So I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna bump, and I don't know if this will work for you, Janelle, the May meeting
Okay.
to last week of April to kind of correspond with RSA.
Oh, that's probably fine because Ignite is the first week of May.
Right,
And I'll probably be at Ignite, so that works
yeah,
out.
me too.
Yeah, so,
So I've already got two tentative commitments. So last year we had Nathan Ide. Anybody attend that? The Pass the Hash, yeah. So he presented a presentation called Pass the Hash. And it's not a vulnerability, it's the way things work that people can use to get elevated privileges. I highly encourage you to attend this. We're still working on dates, times, and I'm assuming, I don't know, we'll have a room here?
probably.
Probably. Do you have lots of rooms?
These are the biggest rooms.
Okay.
But
We'll see. I'll keep it posted on that. He really liked presenting to our group, so he said, I'm presenting with Rasinovich. I'm down here. I want to present to your group because you guys are more fun than RSA.
that's quite a compliment.
Yeah, that is quite a compliment. Nathan's a great guy. If you've looked at Windows 10, and I forgot who they partner for logins. So they're doing a brand new type of login in Windows 10. And I don't know what I can tell and what I can't tell, but they partnered with a company that's handling single sign-on. Like, it's not Adobe, but Abode. And I probably have the wrong name because I can't remember all this stuff. Anybody heard of that company? No, okay. Who?
OKTA.
No, it's with an A. All right, we can argue later. So Nathan's coming down, and then we're also working with Snover, right? Have you heard anything from Eric?
Not since the last email stuff from Eric.
Yeah, so
But I know Snover's coming for the
RSA or something else.
I don't know. Chef? No. I don't know. Anyway, he's coming for something, right? Anyway, he'll be here.
It's not RSA.
I don't know. I don't remember the dates.
Yeah, I don't remember the dates either. So we've got kind of two special presentations. So no meeting in May. We'll bump that. Maybe have two in April. Beginning of the month, end of the month. And I think that's all I have for tonight. Anything you want to cover, talk to me. We got to work out the food situation. Don't count on it for a couple months.
No, we should be fine by next month.
No, don't count. I gotta work some things out on the food.
Really?
Yeah, we'll talk.
Okay.
If you want steering committee, if you want to talk to us, or you want to arrange any topics, let us know. Otherwise, we'll see you next month. All right, thanks for attending.